research into, I wouldn't call it substance so much as seriousness. This question has to do with the boundaries of our field. In particular, how this boundary question is expressed in language, and even more particularly, how the term bioethics relates to the many other terms that people in our world use to describe or label what they do. So I'd like you now, all of you, to think about the terms you use when you describe your work. How many of you use the term bioethics? How many of you use another term, either in addition to or as an alternative to bioethics to describe it? A lot of people. I'm not surprised, right? I'm not surprised that so many of us don't use only the term bioethics. There are lots of other terms to choose from. I want you to consider the following: medical ethics, nursing ethics, dental ethics, clinical ethics, clinical consulting ethics or consulting clinical ethics, organizational health ethics, research ethics, public health ethics, population health ethics, gen ethics, neuroethics. You might have noticed that these terms have in common that all of them denote or specify the subject matter of inquiry or practice. So genetics or public health or medicine or nursing, healthcare organization, and so on. It's this kind of term that I want to focus on in particular. There are at least two stances to take on the relationship of such terms to bioethics. One is to view these terms as naming fields that are in important respects different from bioethics. Under this view, neuroethics or population health ethics or clinical ethics is not bioethics. Rather, they are fields outside of and different from bioethics in important intellectual and practical ways. This view assumes, among other things, that bioethics can be given meaning and content in ways that exclude the meaning and content of these other fields. Now, the other stance is to view these terms as meaning specific areas of specialty or focus within bioethics. So understood, bioethics is the generic or the broader term, and population health ethics or neuroethics or nursing ethics are specific areas of inquiry or practice within the broader parent designation of bioethics. I personally have a strong preference for the second stance. I don't have the time here to develop all the reasons that stand behind that preference, but I'd like to give you what I think of as three good reasons. One is conceptual, one is strategic, and the other is methodological. So first, the conceptual reason. Unlike some, I do not see bioethics as having a distinctive domain. Some particular set of methods or set of principles or mode of inquiry that is unique to bioethics. These would have to be methods or principles or modes of inquiry that could not be found in or are not relevant to, for example, medical ethics, neuroethics, population ethics, or clinical ethics. Put another way, I reject the view that bioethics can be given meaning and content in ways that exclude the meaning and content of these other areas. I don't deny, of course, that neuroethics and clinical ethics, for example, differ from each other in at least meaning and content, but only that bioethics is a very different kind of concept. Now, at this point, some of you might respond that I'm working with a stipulative definition of bioethics that by its very structure makes my conceptual point. If bioethics is defined broadly enough as something like the ethics of healthcare, the ethics of the health of populations, and the ethics of the biomedical sciences, then of course it would subsume narrower areas like nursing ethics or gen ethics and so on. Now, even if this critique of the conceptual point is correct, and I'm not conceding that, I'm just saying let's assume that it is, there's an important strategic reason to employ bioethics in this broad sense. So here's my second strategic reason why I think we should do treat bioethics as our parent term. Bioethics is still a young player in the academy, in the social institutions of health and science, and in public discourse and public policy. In my view, we need a firm identity, a firmer identity than we have now, as one field, if we are to succeed over the long haul in each of these domains. In the academy, as many of you know, resources, influence, and power, and thus the prospects for a future, are to a large extent a function of size, but also of a clear niche in the academic organism. You have to have a place. Local academic cultures vary, of course, but building internal recognition within your academic setting, for bioethics as a field so substantial it has subfields or areas of specialty expertise, can be critical for presence and for influence, and especially for the successful advancement of academic careers. The same can be said, I believe, within the social institutions of health and science. Building a positive identity for what people in our field do in and about these institutions is an ongoing task, a task I believe that is strategically advanced by building the identity for bioethics more broadly. With regard to public discourse and public policy, now there are no such data, at least I don't think there are. But if we had polling data from the US or from anywhere around the world for that matter, about people's views concerning bioethics, I think we would find that many, if not most people, haven't a clue about what we do, including well-educated people, sophisticated people, people in positions of authority and influence and power. They don't understand our expertise, and they don't understand what contribution we bring. They don't even know the term. That's my guess. Assuming we value having the wider world understand what we do and what we can bring, then as a strategic matter, there is efficiency in working together to build public recognition around a single parent term like bioethics, from which an understanding of cognate subfields can then flow more easily. So those are my strategic arguments, or my strategic reason. Finally, I believe there's a methodological reason for holding on to bioethics as a parent term. If there is a defining feature of modern bioethics, it is as being an interdisciplinary, or at least a multidisciplinary field. At Hopkins, for example, the Berman Institute is often touted for having successfully broken down the traditional disciplinary and divisional silos of academic organization. But as some of my wonderful colleagues at the Berman Institute have pointed out to me, there is another kind of siloing that we are at risk of redefining. Not a siloing by discipline, but by area of specialty or focus. At the Berman Institute, we self-organize naturally, if not perfectly, by interest, predominantly around public health ethics, research ethics, clinical ethics, and the ethics of science. We are now beginning to recognize the importance of not letting this self-organization stand in the way of the kind of innovative work that can occur when people who work in different subfields of bioethics think together about what seem to be disparate issues. I could give examples of this, but I'm interested in how we do one time. Okay, so here's the example. But just to get you thinking. A colleague came to us from the Bloomberg School with a problem. And the problem was that he was struggling with whether to move resources from a vaccine program directed at very poor children in a very poor part of the world, where they had not completely achieved their objectives, but where they had completed much of their objective with regard to the numbers of children they wanted to vaccinate. Resources were scarce, and there was another place where they could move that program, where they would have desperate need and many more children unvaccinated. And he came to me wanting to talk to our folks in public health ethics about the ethics of essentially withdrawing the program. You see where I'm going with this, right? Not because they had done all the good they could do, but because the amount of good they now could do was going to take up a tremendous amount of resources relative to what they could do if they moved those resources somewhere else. Does this have any resonance at all? And I have been thinking about this ever since, that there should be, right, structures that say, you know what, let's say the people who've been thinking about this question in the clinical environment for a really long time, talk with the people who are thinking about this problem now in the population and public health arena, and come to understand both whether there are differences or similarities between the structures that matter morally, that affect what our stances should be in these cases, and maybe we could come up with a better way of thinking about how to handle that problem in both those arenas. So this is my methodological point about not letting us get too separated, right? Get re-siloed. And I have to thank colleagues at the Berman Institute for helping me come to understand the importance of this point. So just to summarize, I've provided three reasons, or three sets of reasons. One conceptual, one strategic, or if you like political, and one methodological, in defense of the view that bioethics should be employed as the term for our broad field, one that is inclusive of subfields and specialties. I want to close with two categories. First, I'm not here suggesting that all inquiries or practice with which bioethics has commerce are subfields of bioethics. Bioethics, like my other love, public health, is a broad field, but it does have boundaries. Fields like business ethics, animal ethics, environmental ethics share overlapping interests and territory with bioethics. But I would submit to you that the relationship between bioethics and, say, environmental ethics is not a nested one of the sort in which I would want to say nursing ethics or research ethics is nested within the parent field of bioethics, but rather the right model might be one more of overlapping circles in a Venn diagram, where there's that territory in environmental ethics or business ethics, which looks almost indistinguishable from a parallel or similar territory in bioethics. So that's my first category. And bioethics is not the law of the world, okay? It has some boundaries. Second, I also do not need to suggest, nowhere near do I need to suggest this, that all programs or services in our field need to call or be called bioethics programs. Far from it. There are often very good reasons to use subfield or what you might think of as specialty names. Having a program in clinical ethics or neuroethics or research ethics or population health ethics can be very important. Just as it can be important to have specialty meetings, specialty professional organizations, and specialty journals in bioethics. But specialty or subfield organization is not inconsistent with remaining connected to and a part of the broader label of bioethics and the colleagues globally that are captured by it. I believe that there is strength in numbers. I believe there is strength in connecting dots between seemingly disparate questions and challenges and contests. And I believe that there is strength in unity. There is strength in bioethics.